In this video, I'll cover one of the most important aspects of Lambda programming, which is error handling. If you are a software engineer, you are well aware that systems tend to fail, and this is no different for Lambda also. So at the low level, you have to make your code resilient enough to handle the errors. So first let's look at different types of error that you might face with Lambda. First one is error initializing the Lambda. So this can be related to your function signature, problem loading your code. For example, if we pass wrong method or class name, we get initialization error. Let me show you this example. I am in Lambda console right now, and if I go to runtime settings and let's say by mistake I have wrong class name here, and if I save this and try to test my Lambda function, I should be getting this initialization error. Let's go to test now, and let's say I click test here. This is the error that I'm getting here, class not found. Why? Because I've mentioned the wrong class name in my runtime settings. So this is the first type of error that you might get with Lambda. Second is error parsing input into specified function parameters. Let me go to my IntelliJ to explain you this. So as this is my S3 event handler function, and you can see this handle request method takes S3 event as input. Now, if I pass something different, let's say apart from this S3 input, which can't be deserialized, then I should be getting this parse error. Let me show you this also from Lambda console. In test, I know that my function takes S3 event as input. Now instead of that, I can just pass, let's say, my name only as a string value. What does we get? Here you can see this failed, and you can see the error messages. An error occurred during JSON parsing. Why? Because string can't be passed to this S3 event, right? This is the second type of error that you can get with Lambda. Third one is error communicating with an external downstream service. So let's say in your Lambda function, you are calling DynamoDB, or let's say RDS, or let's say any other HTTP service, which is resulting into some kind of errors. An example could be like your DB query is malformed, which can result into some kind of SQL exception. The fourth one is error in your Lambda environment. So this could be any runtime exception thrown by your code, or an issue like, out of memory error. And the fifth one and the last one is function timeout. You have to make sure enough time is allocated to your Lambda function, and you can check internally in your code to make sure your Lambda shuts down gracefully in case of timeout error occurs. Let me tell you how you can do that. If you have watched my previous videos, you would have a fair idea about this context object. From this context object, there is something called get remaining time in millis. So from this value, you can get to know how much time is left with your Lambda, and you can run a loop here, and if you encounter that time is less and your processing is not completed yet, so you can save your tasks and your Lambda would be shut down gracefully. So Lambda error behavior is driven by the type of event sources that trigger its invocation. So I would be covering the different error handling strategies based on invocation types. So this would be easy for you also, as most of your use cases would fall into the invocation types that I would be covering in this video. So the first one is synchronous event sources, or you can say the request response model. An example of this would be using API gateway or application load balancer to invoke the Lambda. You are creating serverless microservices using AWS, then the chances are you would be using this type of approach. The next one is asynchronous event source, which are event driven. So example of this would be triggering Lambda from S3, for example, S3 put object, or through SNS event. The last one is stream or queue event source, in which Lambda processes group of messages together. For example, if you're using Kinesis and you're getting hundreds of messages per second, so in that case, you cannot pick one message at a time, right? Rather, you should be doing the batch processing of the messages. So you would poll your messages, let's say 150 messages at a time, and you would be processing that. So these are the three invocation types, and all three have different error handling strategies, which I would be covering one by one. So let's jump on the synchronous event source. So this invocation type has the most simplest way of handling errors, because you don't have to change any Lambda configuration for this as compared to the other invocation types. So since this is request response model, so error is propagated back to the caller. Most appropriate example that you can give for this is API gateway integration with Lambda. So if API is calling Lambda and error is thrown by Lambda, so it should be sent back to the API gateway. There's no automatic retry as such in this case with Lambda config. But yeah, I mean, it's always the best practice to retry. So clients should implement this retry mechanism. So apart from the API gateway, you can use application load balancer also to trigger the Lambda. Now, what are the best practices in error handling in this invocation type when you work in production grade system? So the first and the foremost is logging your errors in CloudWatch. So since Lambda is already integrated very well with CloudWatch, so when you put logging statements, that automatically goes to CloudWatch. So you should use a well-defined pattern for your logs so that you can query your logs from services like Athena. If you want to learn more about Athena, you can check the link in top right corner of your screen. Second best practice is to set up CloudWatch alarm. You already get monitoring in place for Lambda. You get all the graphs I can show you in the Lambda console. So if I go to this monitor tab, you can see the CloudWatch metrics here. So you can check, you have different metrics like invocations, duration, error count and success rate, then throttling, async delivery failures, iterator age. So these are not for the synchronous one. So these metrics are of no use if you don't take any action on that, right? And you can't just look at these metrics and decide what to do, right? So you should set up alarm in CloudWatch. You can set alarm based on, error count rate or throttling error which you are getting. Make sure that errors which you are getting in your Lambda should not go unnoticed. And if you want to see how you can do that, I can show you in CloudWatch. So if you can go to the alarms and you can go all alarms, you can click on create alarm and you have to select a metric. So in our case, we want to set up alarms on Lambda, and I want this to be across all functions or maybe a particular function, and I should be doing it on the errors. I can select this metric here and I can define what should be the threshold for this metric. You can define if there are certain number of errors in the period of 5 minutes or let's say 15 minutes or 1 hour, you should be getting an email or you should be getting a message through SNS. So let's say that I define 5 minutes and my error count should not be more than 20 in 5 minutes. Then I can just go next and I can choose the SNS topic and I can get the notification. So this is a really good way to get to know about the different errors in your Lambda, and you can take custom actions on this also. You can add some auto scaling action or some EC2 action or system manager action. So this is really helpful. And if you've not explored this, I would recommend you to explore this CloudWatch alarms also. And the last thing is to sanitize error before returning to the caller. So what this means is, instead of throwing exceptions directly, do send error message and code along with the necessary details. So this is very important because without this, caller won't be able to determine what exactly caused the error. Now is the demo time. I'll create a sample application in which API gateway would be calling the Lambda function, and I'll show you how you can implement proper error handling in this case. So the example would be like this, a simple example wherein I'll create a new API, and from that API we would be invoking Lambda function. Okay, so let's get started. I'll go to my IntelliJ. So this is the same workspace from my last video. I'll create a new package here for my error handling demo. And I'll create a new Lambda function here. And I'll follow the same approach. I'll implement request handler. And this request handler will be having API gateway, proxy, request event, and would be returning the response event. Press Alt, insert, and override the methods. So this is the method handle request. So the first thing is initialize Lambda logger. So the first thing is log the entire event. This is just for our understanding. I'll change this name to request event. Okay, so this is done. Let's say this method gets user detail from post call and saves that to DB. You can take this JSON as an example. Request body would be having username as some value and then ID as some value. Okay, what we can do is we can fetch the request body from the event. We can call request body, request event dot get body. Now, as I told you, this request body would be having username and ID. So we can deserialize this to user object. For that, I can create a new class here, a Pojo class, user. And I can add getter setters. Sorry. And toString method also. So this is my user. Now I can deserialize that. User equals to. For deserializing, we can either use Jackson or JSON. I'm more comfortable with JSON. So what I can do is I can create a new JSON object here. As I told you in the last video, it's always preferable to initialize object set class level because this can be used in the next invocation. So I have this JSON and what I can do is I can do call from JSON and I can pass the body and user dot class. Yeah. Now I will get the user object here. The next thing is there can be the case that user details are not properly passed by the caller, right? So there should be a client check also. We should be checking if username and ID are correct or not. Let's say for now they are not null. In case they are null, we should be returning back the proper error for that, right? So what I can do here is I can call if string utils so in this case I should be throwing an exception, right? As I told you in the theory part that we should sanitize the exceptions or errors, right? So what I meant by that is we should be sending proper error message and error code. Let's throw the exception for now. Let's try this for now and let's see what we get in the CloudWatch logs, okay? And we can return null for now. So this is our Lambda function. So this is not complete yet. I just want you to show what exactly is printed once we throw runtime exception or let's say any our custom exception, right? I'll first package this. I'll call ambient clean package. To deploy this package, we need a new Lambda. I'll go to my Lambda console. I'll go to functions. I'll create a new function from scratch. Let's say we call it Lambda error handling. And runtime is obviously Java 11. And rest everything I'll keep as it is. I'll create function. Our build is completed. I'll go to the target and I'll open the folder. So our Lambda is created. I can go to code source. I can just upload the jar file. Now I need to change this runtime settings. Otherwise, I can get a runtime exception or runtime error in Lambda. I'll go to edit. I'll just go back and copy the package name. I can save this. Now Lambda is created. To invoke our Lambda function, we need API gateway, right? So I can search API gateway here. If you have not used API gateway earlier, that's fine. I would be giving you demo how to create API. So I'll not explain everything, but yeah, I mean, you'll get the basic knowledge. So this is my API gateway console. I can go to REST API and click build. Okay. I can use a new API. I can name it as Lambda test, and endpoint we need regional. We don't need edge optimized or private. I can click on create API, click action here and create resource, and I'll name it as save create resource. For this resource we need a method, and this should be a post. Now the integration of this API should be with Lambda function, right? So we can keep this selected and we will select use Lambda proxy integration, and region is EU West 2 because I'm in that region. Then we need to select the Lambda function also. You have to start typing here. So our Lambda name is Lambda error handling. You can get the options below. Okay, and I'll click save here. So this will ask you for the permission. Click OK. Yeah, this API is created, and even if you go to your Lambda function, as I explained you in my previous video of S3 integration, you will see here on the left trigger, you don't see anything, right? But I just now integrated API gateway with Lambda. So if you just refresh this, you'll see API gateway here. Yeah, you can see here, right? And if you click here, you'll get all the details like what method and the resource path. Okay. And we're not using any authorization as such. You can also test your API gateway, but before that you need to deploy it. So you can click on deploy API, and you can create a new stage for this. Maybe call it as test and click deploy. So this is the API URL which you can use, and I'll open my Postman. So if you go back to your API, if you go back to your resource and select the method, you get an option to test this. So if I click test here, and this is a JSON, I can just go to API gateway and I can pass this. Let's just test this. Okay. Click on test. So you can see here, so this is the error that we are getting, guys. So you can see this is the initialization error. I think G is missing here. I'll go back to my Lambda. So these are the frustrating issues. I'll click edit. I'll just change this to G and click save. I'll go back to my API gateway and click test again. So you can see here, we got malformed Lambda proxy response, and to get the details, we need to go to Lambda. To get the details, we need to go to CloudWatch logs. So I can just go to my Lambda and click monitor and view logs in CloudWatch to directly go to that particular log stream. So I can choose the first one, and we can see here in our code we are actually printing the API full event, right? So if I see here, so we have the API full event and we are getting the body as username Ajay and ID this. And the if check we added for null username and ID, so it's not going inside it. We are not getting any runtime exception. So null is getting passed, and which is causing the problem. Okay. Instead of let's say passing the correct body, maybe I can just pass the empty username, and let's just try what happens. You can see still we have internal server error, 502 error, but you can see here endpoint response body here is runtime exception. This gives you this pretty bad stack trace. And to get more detail, we can go to CloudWatch. I can just go and refresh this. Yeah, you can see here, this is the error that we are throwing. This is the custom error that we are throwing. So this says details are not valid, runtime exception, which is the message that we passed in a runtime exception. So from this particular exception, caller would not be getting the enough detail. And when we talk about Lambda, our invocations would be going into maybe you can say thousands every day. So it's not really easy to just look at the errors and figure out the problems. So you must be passing the error in a particular format so that caller can get the details and they can implement further options to retry or handle it some other way. Okay, so I can show you what you can do here to make it pretty. I'll comment this out. Maybe I can create a new constants class here. First of all, I'll create a new constant client error just to give this particular type of error a code. Let's say this error has code 5 ones. Okay, I can go back to my Lambda, and do remember that we need to return API gateway proxy response event, and in that response event you can pass the whatever error that you are getting. And for making our error bit more pretty, I will create a new error class. This would be again a Pojo. Again, you can create getter, setters, and constructor, and toString also in case we want to print it. Apart from this, I'll be creating a new response class in which I'll be setting this error and the status code, HTTP status code, and the request body. Okay, so this response class, we can change this to this, and the error class that we created. So in case if we are sending any error, we'll be setting the values, and in case our request is success, then in that case we will not be setting any value, so this would be null. And from HTTP status code, client can check if the response is 201 or 200. If it is not, then client can check the error and get to know the type. Yeah, so this is done. Now I can go back to my Lambda function. I need to sanitize the error. So I can create a new method here. So I created this method because I may need to call this method multiple times, right? Because for now we are doing client check, and let's say if we are handling server error also, we may need to return some kind of error in that case also, right? So I created this method, and this return API response method is just to create a object for API gateway proxy response event with necessary details. This is status code. We will be passing Lambda logger also. So the first argument is status code, which would be HTTP status code. Then response body, we are actually passing string for now. So you can pass whatever you want because we created a response of generic type. It's up to you. Then error message, error code, and then Lambda logger. So this is I have added just to log the error in CloudWatch. Now I can create a error object here. So I'll remove this parameterized constructor. If in case our error code and error message are not empty, then only we'll be setting the error object, right? So that's why I added a if statement here. You can add another or and if you want to enforce both error code and error message. So what I can do here is I can just call error dot set error code. Apart from that, we just need to create a new object of API gateway proxy response event. So this again uses builder pattern. So you can use with status code, which we are passing. If you want to pass any header, so you can use with headers also, but I don't have any header. I don't want to pass for now in this example. I want to pass the body, and I can just serialize my object to JSON. And in that I can call a new response, and I want to pass a body, let's say of string type. You can pass anything here, guys, literally. I mean, if you're returning anything from database, you can pass that a different object, or anything can be done here, because I made this as a generic. Okay, if you remember, response takes 3 arguments: HTTP status code, response body, and error. So guys, you must be wondering, we are setting status code here also, and then again in response. So basically this status code is for the API gateway. So when a caller is calling a Lambda function, so we should be returning something, some status code, right? Either 200 or 400 or 500, right? So this status code is for the API gateway, and this body is to actually parse what exactly is happening with our Lambda function, right? So I hope this is clear. I'll show you when I invoke this. So then I can just return this response event. So this is done. Before even returning, I just want to log this in my CloudWatch. That's it. So I'm done with my return API response method. Now here, I just need to call return API response. In this case, when username is empty or ID is null, then this is a client error, right? This is a bad request which client has sent to us. So we should be passing HTTP status as bad request, right? Then what should be the body? So I told you, I mean, I am passing the string value as a body. So maybe I can pass something as, and for client error, we already created a new constants.java, and we can just call, paste it here and static import that. Yeah. And then as a message, we can pass and we can pass logger also. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good now. I hope you might be aware that as a best practice, we can move out our errors also outside this. So I can just move this out and create a new constant. Yeah, and I can change this to client error code. And again, in my Lambda function, I can change this to code, and I can change this to message. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good now. I can just import this. Yeah, let's build it, guys, and we'll try testing then. Build is done. I can go to my Lambda and upload this jar file. This is done. So now let's test our Lambda and API gateway from Postman, and before that we can just go to our API to copy the path. So this is our test stage, and I can just copy the address and go to my Postman, save is the resource and post is the method, and hope username and ID is also fine. In case everything is fine, we are returning null. So let's try first, what exactly we are getting in case we pass correct username and ID. So you can see this is internal server error because null is not type of API gateway proxy response event. So we have just handled this error scenario as of now, client error scenario. To replicate this, I'll just delete the name here and let's just test this now. Yeah, you can see here guys, this is the response that we got from our Lambda. So see this, how this is looking now. We are getting complete information from the response. The status code is 400 and you can see here the bad request. Response body is request body not valid. This is saying what exactly is required. And then error is username or ID should not be null. I think these are used interchangeably. I'll change this in my code. So I think this is pretty good, and you have logged this in CloudWatch also, and you can query the data in CloudWatch whenever you want. Now let's just try to send the correct response here. So I've already written this return API response. So in case of success response, I should be again calling this return API response, but status code should be okay. And response body should be success. Error message and error log is null. We don't need them. So I can just pass null here. Let me just change this. First is error message and then is error code. This is done. Let me deploy this method. I'll update the code. I can go to Postman and let's just pass the correct name here. Yeah, so response is success and HTTP status code is 200, body is success. In this case, instead of passing success here, you can pass a custom object here, user details or whatever the query that you want to fire. And you can see error here is empty. And again, if you want to replicate, just don't pass the username and just send you can get the proper response code. Yeah guys, I hope this is clear to you how you can appropriately handle the errors in case of synchronous invocation. For server error, I can just replicate one scenario for you guys. So what you can do is, let's say you are maybe calling database, you are saving some details, you are fetching some details, okay? So let's say that this particular method deals with operation. This can be a DB operation or calling a new API. If user.getID is, let's say 101, then in that case there is some error. Otherwise it's success. Even for this scenario, if you throw exception, let's say user ID not valid, it will not be a good practice to do this. And let me show you what exactly do you see in Postman. Let me deploy this code also. Yeah, let me invoke with user ID 101. Now you can see here, this is the error that you are getting here. So are you getting any detail from here? No, you are just getting that 502 bad gateway. So from bad gateway, you are not going to get any more detail. You have to go to Lambda, you have to go to CloudWatch to get the details. So let's say if I try 102, this should work fine, right? Success. But for 101, we are getting some kind of exception, but we don't know what is that. So just consider this scenario, right? This is better or this one is better. Obviously this one, right? Client can easily get to know status code and then get the error. From error it gets to know, yeah, this is the problem, right? So I can just go to my Lambda. What I can do is I can just include this in my try cache, and in case of exception I should be handling this, right? I can include this in here. We should always log the errors. You should always use logger here and log everything. Okay, now in this case for 101 we are getting runtime exception. What I can do is I can again call return API response. I know that this is a server error, right? I can just call 500 here. I can call here db call failed maybe. In error message I can again go to constants. I can declare 2 new error messages. So this is my server error code and message. I can just go and call server error message, and I do need to pass the user ID also. User dot get username, then server error code, then logger, right? Yeah, so this is my server error handling, and let me just follow the same process, just deploy it. Yeah, it's saved. Let me just go and call our method with, let's say, first 102. So this is a success scenario, right? We should be getting a success here. Yeah, it's fine. Now let's replicate the client error. This is also fine. Now replicate the server error with ID 101. Yeah, I mean, this is much better. Caller should be having some flexibility when this message is sent back. This is what I wanted to cover in synchronous invocation type. So I will move to the next part, which is asynchronous invocation type error handling. So this would be in my next video, guys. So stay tuned for my next video.